Topping Talks. 105 hours a week, can't be beat. Welcome to Topping Talks. Topping Talks is a Topping Tribune production, and today's episode is proudly sponsored by Topping Technologies and ExpressVPN. Topping Technologies is an IT valued-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency in security. I say their founder at least twice a day, and I have to say he's quite handsome and brilliant. If you're a business in Texas that could use the help, you can reach us at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also, are you part of the 3.6% of Americans who still care about their privacy? If you are, then perfect. ExpressVPN can assist. Even though 96% of stats are made up on the spot, ExpressVPN does give a 100% guarantee on their services via a 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, without further ado, I'm proud to say that today interviewing my friend and client, BJ Meyer, who is the current CIO at Higginbotham.
Hey, Topping. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on the show, bud. I appreciate it.
My pleasure and honor.
So, gotta tell me, how did you first get your role at Higginbotham?
Well, Higginbotham, I was looking for a change and was simply doing online searches and found an opportunity. The company wasn't listed. It was a third-party recruiter had posted it online, right? And so I'm reading through the description of the job. And there were a couple of things that sounded familiar. Higginbotham is an insurance company. We're a brokerage. We're one of the top 20 brokerage agencies in the U.S. And so they're in the insurance space, right? So I saw this listing for a Fort Worth-based insurance company, and there's only so many of those, right? And I actually had a buddy of mine who was in a senior role at Higginbotham. So I gave him a call, and I'm like, hey, are you guys looking for a CIO? And he said, yeah, but how do you know that? We haven't told anybody. I'm like, well, I can read, deductive reasonings, kind of what I do, right? Figuring things out. And so I asked, hey, do you know the hiring manager? And it was a chief people officer, and he's like, yeah, his office is 2 doors down from mine. Let me go give him your resume. And to their credit, and this is a kind of company that Higginbotham is, they could have, they were using a third-party search firm. Mm-hmm. I bypassed them, right, and went direct to Higginbotham, and they could have saved a significant amount of money direct hiring me. But they said, that's not fair. It's not fair to the other candidates because now there's a financial incentive to hire this guy. And so the chief people officer, he decided, hey, we're going to send BJ through the normal interview process with the third-party consulting firm, just to keep the playing field leveled. So that was cool, and that's really awesome that's the kind of company with integrity Higginbotham is. I was disappointed because I felt like I lost some of my advantage, but it worked out for me in the end. So, it's one of those things that everybody talks about how important networking is in career development, and it really was, because what I found out afterwards is they had basically stopped looking at new candidates. And I slid in after the fact because of a relationship that I'd had. And that wasn't even a pure business relationship. The individual I knew, Ross Carmichael, I knew from one of my hobbies. And he and I we're both car guys and worked together for years on car stuff.
So did you work on cars together, or did you build them together?
So I actually, I have a secondary business, an automotive business, and he was a customer there. And then he's also, we've horse traded a little bit. We're both BMW guys, and I think he bought a shell that I had that he was using for spare parts for his race car, and then he also had bought an old 7 Series that I was daily driving. That his dad, when Ross was a kid, his dad had the same car, and so it was his first experience with a BMW was a car like this, and so he thought it would be cool to own one. So he bought that one from me. So both personal and hobby stuff. Yeah, we knew each other in a lot of ways, but that's you find that especially as you get more and more senior in your career, that those relationships make a huge difference. And it's not just business relationships, it's your personal relationships, hobby, church, whatever, organizations,
philanthropic.
yeah,
Philanthropic. I can't pronounce things for the life of me.
Yeah. So what they all have impact and can help you out, and that's a case where it did.
So were you tricking out the cars for him, or were you getting them to race spec? Or?
Yeah. So I quite honestly, I don't remember how much work we might have done on Ross's cars. If it was minor setup, we're talking nearly 10 years ago, probably the last time I touched one of his cars. So I don't really recall, because I think a lot of his work he has done in Fort Worth with Texas Track Works, which those guys are good friends of ours as well. But we veered off of Higginbotham there. But so started at Higginbotham. Obviously the interview process went well.
I was going to say, you got it.
And it's about 5 years ago I started with Higginbotham, and it's been a really great ride. So Higginbotham, we're a large agency, and we're growing like crazy. And they were really, their growth had been taking off for a while when I joined, but it was really gaining critical mass, and they were having trouble keeping their technology offerings, supporting the business, and being able to scale with the business. And so that's really what they were looking to do, or why they were bringing in a CIO at that time, to really help their scalability. And since I've joined Higginbotham over the last 5 years, by the end of this year, we'll be close to tripling in size and tripling in revenues. When I joined, we were just in Texas. I guess we had one office in Oklahoma, and now we're in 15, 17 states, coast to coast. So it's a dramatically different company. And so it's been exciting because I've gotten to reinvent IT at the same time we're keeping up with all this growth. And we grow both organically and through acquisition. And so there's lots of M&A and conversions and integrations and things like that. And so it's been very challenging, but very rewarding as well, and quite exciting. I mean, insurance doesn't sound like the most exciting industry in the world, but it really is. I mean, insurance and financial services has become one of the largest contributors to the U.S. GDP. In fact, we're becoming a financial services country. And so this was a tremendous opportunity for me to be in one of the most impactful industries in our country. And who doesn't want to be in the biggest industry, right? If you're in corporate or enterprise IT, supporting the businesses that are growing and doing the best has a lot of advantages. And I found that to be very true at Higginbotham.
Oh, it's so much more exciting, too, when you're working to help propel a company and adapt and just make it so that when you acquire this company, just copy-paste, because you got all the standards in place, everything's working seamlessly. And a lot of people don't know the oldest business in history is financial-based. I think I want to say is based in Japan, but they're one of the oldest companies in history.
Yeah, and insurance is some of the first contracts ever created. I mean, insurance is a product that goes back a long time, and especially back in the when so much of your trading, it was all maritime stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you had these people that it used to be moving cargo across in a ship across the sea or ocean was a huge risk, right? And a lot of the owner operators that had these ships, they couldn't afford it if they lost their cargo, and so they started. This idea of insurance was created where they would have wealthy people basically take on that risk for them, and they would pay them, and they would play the odds. It was and cover that risk. That way, he didn't lose their entire fleet of ships if one went down with some cargo. So, yeah, that goes back to some of the earliest insurance transactions, but yeah, it's something that's been around a long time. It's kind of a necessary evil, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, nobody loves paying their insurance premiums,
No.
but you like when they work for you,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It's
And
invaluable.
so it's something we can't live without. Nobody loves, but from an industry to be in perspective, I mean, it's a great place for me as well. I mean, it's one of the things that was attractive about this after spending some time in some more startup cultures. Higginbotham was great because their growth and how much they're growing and changing feels very startup-like. But you're talking about an organization with an 80-plus year history that in an industry that's very well established and very, very stable. Businesses always need insurance, and that's one thing I should say. We're in the insurance space, but mainly the commercial space. So we do a little bit of personal insurance, but our bread and butter is business insurance, employee benefits, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hard sea to navigate, kind of pun intended, going back to the maritime analogy. But yeah, a lot of people don't know, like, if you're a business, you want to find insurance, that's easier said than done. There's literally hundreds and thousands of options. That's where Higginbotham comes in and helps you navigate what's going to fit your business, what's going to be the best need.
Yeah, and from a technology perspective, it's a good industry to be in. So, InsurTech is a fast growing category, and so I will admit that insurance has been a little slow to adopt a lot of technology. It's a very conservative business category, but they've really embraced technology. So it's an exciting time to be in it as we're really looking at how we can better leverage data and analytics and technology and digitize that customer experience and those kinds of things. And so it's a great spot to be. I couldn't be more thankful to be with Higginbotham.
Absolutely. And I know it's cliche to say, but data is the future. I remember, I think it was 2017 or 18, the first time in history, the most valuable asset on the planet was data, not oil.
Yeah.
Or gold. Like, that's insane. But it makes sense. I mean, it's what drives all of our purchases. It's all about the analytics. What's your Google search history? Let's sell that to that company and put that ad right in front of your face. And
yeah,
I was about to say somehow, but more often than not, it works.
Yeah, and it's getting to the point of scary. Something that I just heard is what's the company name? iRobot, I think it is. Is that the company that owns the Roomba vacuum? So that was just acquired by Amazon.
Was it 1.2 or 1.3 billion? A lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. I think it was their second largest acquisition.
Right after Ring. Ring was 1 billion, I think.
But it's the thing that's fascinating about that is just how much data Amazon's collecting, right? So they can listen to us. They know what we're watching on TV. They know what we're buying and shopping for. But they get a whole bunch of data from these Roombas now, where they'll know what we have sitting around our house and what we may need to replace and things like that. And who knows if they're going to use that data in that way, but it'd be hard not to. I mean, they're very good at selling things to people. They're the
best. I mean, I would argue. I mean, you look at historical companies, no one utilizes data better than Amazon. I can't imagine just the amount of data you gather from the Roombas or the iRobots. you know their layout, you know where there's space, then you could just start pitching them ideas for maybe furniture that would optimize your experience. I mean, the possibilities for Amazon are literally endless.
Yeah, well, and it depends on how much data they get back, because some of those units have cameras, so they could do object recognition. So you'd be able to tell things like what pet they have, perhaps what pet food they use, and how many kids they have, what toys do their kids like, right? It's endless. It's fascinating, but and that's a big part of why data is so valuable. Is it just helps us do what we've always done, and that's sell things to people, right? I mean, that's the core of business. These are the kinds of discussions where I have very mixed feelings about, right? Because I like my privacy, and data security is important, but so in those regards, I'm not a huge fan of this move.
Yeah.
But in a business play, I think, man, gosh, these guys are smart. I always appreciate intelligent business decisions, and that's, this is up there. It just starts to get into some, I guess, moral gray areas.
But, exactly.
Um,
murky waters, going back to the merchant analogy.
Exactly.
They know more than your family. I think it was 2009. I read an article about Target. They had a mom and pop, and they had the kids at home. And the dad, all of a sudden, they started to get these, the Sunday flyers. Maybe this is the 90s. And all of a sudden, he said, "Well, why we're in our 40s. We have our kids, our teenagers. Why are we getting advertisements for baby products and accessories?" And eventually the dad gets so mad, he calls Target. He goes, "Hey, why are you saying this? I don't need this. I don't want this." And later finds out, oh yeah, his daughter's pregnant. So wow. Target knew more about his daughter than he did. That's astonishing. And that was a decade ago.
Yeah.
So imagine what they know now. So there's a reason my TV was made in 83 or 84. Sony Trinitron, can't listen to me there.
No. Good TV. I had a Trinitron.
Yeah, every time I think about buying a TV, I always remember my friend, some friend who they bought a TV quote unquote recently within 2 or 3 years and it breaks. It's like, well, that heavy duty lead filled TV from the 80s still works. So I don't know. I started thinking about products. The more technology you put in, sometimes they inherently seem to get less reliable in some ways. In others, not so much, but maybe manufactured obsolescence.
Yeah, and I think that's it. So many of these items have become commodities, right? A TV used to be a luxury item.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's a commodity, right? Yeah. And the prices kind of reflect that. I mean, what I can buy a TV for today, they're basically disposable. But in the 80s, early 80s, buying a 25-inch TV was a huge investment. I mean, in today's money, it would be like $5,000 or more for a 25-inch TV. That's crazy to think about. But and so I think a lot of that quality goes along with that, right? When it's not a luxury item, you don't have the same expectations. Once it's a commodity, and so there's probably some truth to that, but a lot of that's probably just scale and price point and those kinds of things as well. So,
because it is astonishing, you can get a TV for under $80 if you go to a retail store, and just for a small one, and it'll work. I mean, and more often than not, they'll work for a couple of years. But I mean, if you want to hit that price point and you're pumping things out in mass quantities, something's going to fail.
Yeah.
So I apologize for the ADHD. What was the question again?
I don't know. Who asked a question?
I've got some on here. So what was the biggest challenge when you first joined Higginbotham?
I think the biggest challenge was just, the biggest challenge was also the biggest opportunity. It was very, very much a greenfield situation. So this was a company that was really transitioning from being an SMB player to a small enterprise. And so they didn't have a lot of experience in IT governance and, best practices and those kinds of things. So it was great because there weren't a bunch of screwed up practices and policies that I had to try to do away with and replace. But I had to do a lot of education of the users and even in some cases the staff. And we didn't have a lot of specialization within the IT team. So there was a lot of developing skill sets or specialties for the staff to try to bring them along. And, that was extremely challenging, but also extremely rewarding. So it really was both part of the biggest challenge, but also the most rewarding part to tackle, especially when it comes to the people development. I've got a phenomenal team at Higginbotham, and I'm proud to say that pretty much everyone that was here when I joined is still with us. We've had great retention. Almost all of those, everyone that was here when I joined is in a new role now. So they've all had growth and changes, and that's really exciting. And it's exciting to me that culturally the organization has let me invest in people and develop people. I love organizations that value their employees in that way and will try to retain and develop them. Some people or some companies hate making investments in people because they're worried they're going to lose them.
Yep.
I feel like if you treat them well and you make investments and you keep challenging them, that they'll want to stick around. And so far, I've been right. Let's hope that strategy keeps working. But if the past is any indicator, I think it will.
Well, that's especially impressive when you consider how hyper-competitive DFW is for IT talent right now.
Oh, I know. I know. When I'm talking to my peers, it's one of the things we all talk about. It's our greatest challenge right now is just how do we, hire and retain talent?
Yeah. And it's definitely one of the best things about Higginbotham is promoting from within and reinvesting in people. One of my favorite quotes from someone I admire is Richard Branson. And I might be butchering it, but something along the lines of, treat someone well enough and train them well enough so that they can leave, but then treat them well enough so they don't want to.
That is, I didn't realize I'd subscribed to his school of thought, but I certainly couldn't put it better. So
absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, kind of going back to Amazon, they're just gobbling up IT talent left and right as they just keep building out their infrastructure to try to keep up with their astronomical growth and building data centers all over the U.S. And
they've got a lot of IT hiring here in DFW. So, we're directly competing against them for talent, and it's tough.
Especially because who wouldn't want Amazon stock? It's basically gold. Geez Louise.
Quite honestly, it's a lot sexier name than Higginbotham. Nobody knows who Higginbotham is, and insurance isn't very sexy, but Amazon is attractive as an IT professional to have on your resume. Some of their warehouse workers may not feel that it's the best place to work, but even there, it's again some of the things I value about them is they're a phenomenal logistics company. Not only are they great in data, but they're one of the best in logistics. That's long been one of the secrets of Walmart's success is how good they are at logistics, and Amazon's taken that to a whole nother level. And it's, not surprising that they've surpassed Walmart in most retail categories.
Well, if I do forget, it is either UPS or FedEx, but they better be doing something because I remember 2 or 3 years ago, Amazon said, we're going to start building out our own infrastructure, and that accounted for 11% of either UPS or FedEx's annual revenue. So Amazon now has their own Boeings, their own fleets, and they are phenomenal. Like, I don't always lose the package, but when I do, it's not the private sector. But Amazon, their dedication to customer service is astonishing. Just how fast you can reach someone, how fast they can resolve issues. I mean, that's part of the reason they keep growing, I think. And AWS obviously is the big 500-pound gorilla like most people don't know about, but the convenience of AWS has just made IT so much easier.
Yeah. Well, and how amazing was that? You know, that was something that was born out of their own needs to
Brilliant.
support their own infrastructure. And they're like, you know what, we could productize this and have other people help pay for our growing infrastructure. And they've done a brilliant job with it. I mean, and they're when it comes to technology around AWS, they're pretty top notch.
Oh, absolutely. It's astonishing. Perhaps maybe not so much, but you know, the kind of cliche is the best ideas come from external, but none of the server manufacturers who make servers for a living really succeeded in the cloud initiative. I mean, Amazon has the biggest share, then Azure, then Google Cloud, I think, is a 1, 2, 3 in terms of market share of cloud services. And I just was surprised so many of them didn't go all in. Like HPE had the HPE Helion from a New York Minute, which was their cloud initiative, but Amazon just keeps building it, and they build their own infrastructure. They physically build their own servers, just like Google and Facebook, because they need so many, and they can engineer them just that well.
Yeah.
So it's impressive how they just keep chooching along and growing and growing.
Yeah, it really is.
So kind of going back to the original story, I know it's been a couple of years since you first got the Topping Technologies clock in the mail.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to earlier in life, how did you first get into IT?
I mean, I was into technology from a young age. Being a kid of the 80s and early 90s, you know, it goes back to pre-internet days, right? But I was always into computers. I had I think my first computer I bought used from the local Radio Shack. It was a Tandy TRS-80.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, Color Computer 2, and
Nice.
it didn't have a floppy drive. I think when I bought it, it didn't even have a cassette drive. So the way you would save files on it would be on a cassette tape, like an audio cassette tape instead of a floppy disk. It was crazy.
Oh my gosh.
But so anything I wanted to do with it, I had to type the program in myself. So I had this huge book full of basic programs, right? At basic, the language, right? So it'd be like 10, clear screen, just line numbers. And so I'd have to type thousands of lines of code in to do anything with this. And so I started to understand what I was typing and write my own programs. And I was probably about 10. And that's really where it started with me is when I started to see, hey, I can make something happen. And that developed through my childhood into high school. I was a guy, I grew up in a small town in rural Missouri, but everybody came to me for IT support. I set up all the computers for our city hall. For my dad's business, that was a big thing.
How old were you when you were doing that? That's awesome.
Not old enough to drive because my parents would have to drive me around to, take me to City Hall to work on their computers. I was installing Great Plains Accounting, which I think got acquired by Microsoft at some point, for my dad's business and setting up all the invoicing and things like that. So it started really young and had a bunch of practical experience and started going to surplus auctions and buying equipment when I was in high school, cleaning it up, refurbishing it, and selling it. And that's really how I got my start. And so I knew I wanted to go into computers when I went off to college and had a scholarship, went to the University of Missouri, Columbia. Great school, great time. But while I was there, I took an internship, and I was working for, I think, the Department of Biochemistry, and was working for their head of IT, doing network administration, there was this whole new concept of intranet sites, and so I was developing the departmental intranet site, which involved a text editor and this stuff called HTML, and I mean it was before we had a lot of tools, but I did that kind of stuff, but and I really enjoyed it, but the head of IT there looked at me one day and he goes, "Why are you here?" I'm like, "I'm here because you're paying me, man."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, no, no. Why are you at the university?" I'm like, "Well, so I can get my degree and get a job." He's like, "Man, you could be making bank right now." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, your skills are in demand." And I kind of took that to heart, and plus, I was young and stupid, and I think this was my beginning of my sophomore year in college, and so I'm 20 years old, and I had just proposed to my girlfriend at 20, right? So
Yeah.
this shows my lack of rational decision making at this point. But I'm like, a job sounds good right now, and I'd be happy to say I did marry her, and I'm still married to her today. So it worked out okay. But I decided I was going to leave and go to work in IT because we needed money to support ourselves. We wanted to get married, all of that kind of stuff. My fiance at the time thought I was nuts. I remember her crying, thinking that we were going to be, homeless.
Yeah.
And she was still in school, and so I couldn't move away right away. And so the local market in Columbia, Missouri was a little tough.
Yeah.
And ended up, again, networking. A friend of a friend hired me. He had an IT consulting business, but I didn't get hired as a tech. I got hired as a back office person. I was answering phones and doing billing. But I was working for a technology company, so it okay. And I'm only 20 years old, and but what happened was I started answering the phones more and more, and we were getting really busy, and the techs would be out on calls, and so I started fielding calls for customers, and the tech wouldn't be available, and I'm like, well, maybe I can help you. And so I'd provide some assistance over the phone. And, I kept a log of these. And I went to the owner of the company after I'd been doing this for a while and showed him my long list of all these issues. And I'm like, "Hey, so I've worked on all these customer issues. What do you want me to do with these? Should we bill for these, or what should we do?" And that day he made me a tech, and I got my first paid IT job where somebody else was paying me.
That's awesome.
And had a really good first year. Was mainly working. It was partially commission work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was one of our top billing consultants. But then quickly moved on from there. Got an opportunity to relocate to St. Louis, which was a better market, and move into my first real enterprise job. And and then my career kind of took off from there. So, but again, it kind of, we started off talking about it. I mean, leverage who I knew, took a risk and knew my value, and the timing was right on the market. This was pre.com. They would hire anybody if you knew how to turn on a computer. And
Oh, really?
so I often get asked, do you regret not getting your degree? And I'm like, and sometimes the answer is yes. I'd love to have it. Just I like accomplishment, right? But for me, and I don't know that the results. I don't know if I would have had as positive of results, because I got a multi-year head start on a lot of my peers that were in college. And while they were racking up debt, I was earning income. I was getting experience.
Yeah.
And when that first corporate job, I went to work for Anheuser-Busch. I was in a management role at 21 years old, and at really what was the premier company in St. Louis to work for. Everybody wanted to work for Anheuser-Busch.
I mean, that's one of the largest companies on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
everyone knows those horses.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, it was an awesome opportunity. And I don't know, had I finished my degree program, if the timing would have been right for me to get that. And I don't think I would have been able to get that kind of role with just a degree, because part of what led to that was Anheuser-Busch did skills assessments, and I'd been working my tail off as a consultant for I had probably 50 plus different clients. I was seeing all sorts of technical issues on a daily basis. So I got before Anheuser-Busch, got exposure to a ton, and then I got this opportunity at Anheuser-Busch. I did their skills set test, and they'd long been doing this for over a decade, and scored higher than anyone had ever scored on the test before. And that's what opened those doors up. But the whole reason was because I was getting tons of real-world practical experience putting out fires for these clients all over mid-Missouri. And we're talking not fancy big-name clients, a lot of them mom-and-pop businesses and things, but just got so much exposure that it really prepared me well for that moment. And so part of it was just luck, but I'm happy to be lucky. And, that set off what's a great career. I mean, I feel like that paved the way for me to end up in my CIO role at Higginbotham. Certainly the experience working for a large enterprise like that has helped me even today. And I mean, that was 20 years ago, but a lot of that experience is still relevant today. And I really value it and enjoyed that experience. But
that brings me back to one of my favorite philosophies you and I chat about. It's luck versus hard work. I mean, it sounds like you made your own luck. I love how you were doing that consulting prior to Google being a thing. I mean, nowadays a lot of our jobs are made a lot easier because if there's an issue, we can ask the internet first.
Yeah. Well, I will admit there were still, oh gosh, who was it back there? I can't remember if it's Alta Vista groups or there were a number of online forums, not like today, but the idea of looking online for help, that still was a thing. And that consulting company, this will date it. So I had that was right at the beginning of the internet era, and they had a T1, which is basically 1.5 megabits, right? Which was, to me, incredible bandwidth, right? Compared to my dial-up modem, having 1.5 megabits of connectivity was just mind-blowing. How could the internet ever be faster than that? Now
why would you need more than that?
Yeah, now we turn our nose, we look down on 100 meg internet, and that was 1.5, right?
Oh my gosh.
So I was on the internet, and that's the other I think secret to success is just using what's available to you. You don't have to know it all, and even if you think you know the answer, Google it anyway. Make sure, right? Verify.
Can't hurt.
Verify. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, some of it I would say I made my own luck. I mean, some of it may have just been dumb luck. I don't know. I just, no matter what, I feel fortunate.
I mean, those decisions in your 20s, I would argue, when you were quote unquote young and you were still learning a lot, those are the best decisions of all time. Because, I mean, so many people I know who got college degrees when I was in college and myself, they're still paying it back.
Yeah.
And I mean, the ROI for many industries or many degrees realistically just is not there anymore for many instances.
So I think it's right for different people.
Yeah.
Right. I think I don't know that a traditional college education is necessarily right for every industry, and certainly for every person. I think there's some people that need that structure, they need that growth. I think there's some that don't and can pave their own way. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. You know, when I talk about this with people, I've got a son. He's still in elementary school, but people ask me, "Are you going to encourage him to go to college?" And I'm going to say, I don't know where he's going to be at or what he wants to do. If it's what's going to give him the best advantage in life, I'm absolutely going to encourage him to go to college. It's all about doing what can set you up for long-term success. And in retrospect, I know that's what I was doing at the time. I think I made a really bad choice because I did it just out of kind of necessity. I left because I wanted to get married. I wanted income, that kind of stuff. I mean, I would like to say I looked at the market and realized my value in the market and projected that IT was going to continue to take off for the next decade and that it was, I got lucky there, right? I mean, I made a decision just based on current needs. So, but I think that's what the kind of decisions we have to look at is, hey, what makes the most sense for you as an individual, where the market's going, and that's what I'll do with my son. You know, if he wants to be a doctor, he's going to go to college. You know, my wife's an attorney, and schooling was very rewarding for her, if nothing else, for the networking opportunities that law school developed for her, right? And where you go to school and law school opens a lot of doors for you. So, you know, there are industries where it's immensely important. And I think formal training and formal education and extended education, like I want educated doctors, right?
Right.
But, you know, I think there's some things, and technology is one of them, where it's hard for a traditional university to keep creating relevant curriculum, right? That's why I remember being frustrated. My freshman year, I took my first programming class, and this was 95 or so, was in this class. And I think it was Pascal, maybe. And it's not, which was a dead language already. You know, visual development environments were available at this time, but they're teaching me like I'm in VMS or something, doing Pascal and C, and it, you know, I mean, at least it wasn't, you know, COBOL and Fortran, but it still was pretty antiquated. And I just remember, how is this helping me learn anything, right? I mean, this isn't usable. And I think that's one of the challenges with technology and traditional university is that, you know, they've got curriculum that's developed over time and then implemented for years. And so if your role is very operational IT and you have to be current on the latest technology, doesn't necessarily, now you can learn the fundamentals of networking or programming, but that doesn't take a 4 years of study, right? So, you know, I think it depends. And again, but if you're doing data analysis, so data, we were talking about how important data is. There's so much analytics and math, and I do think a lot of that requires extended study. And I think having advanced degrees in data and analytics and statistics is very valuable for the data market, right? It's also why those positions are so highly compensated right now, because they're in demand and they require a long commitment in education. So again, it depends on what you want to do, but I do believe that it's 4-year degree isn't right for all roles for all people.
Agree. I don't know. When
Man, that was a long
No,
answer
I like it,
to
though.
a
It's-
very simple question.
well, I mean, things are often
If
more.
you even ask, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, things are more complex than they usually seem. But like when I was growing up, though, it was almost like a forced copy paste. Like you're going to college, like my whole classmates, like the whole public school experience, mills through elementary through high school, was telling you you're here to prepare for college. You need a degree to be successful. That's kind of the bill of sale. I feel like a lot of people in my generation were sold, which of course for certain degrees and certain skill sets, yeah. I mean, when I look back at what I learned, part of me thinks I just should have started my own business earlier in life. But then again, my degree was how I got a job at HPE, and that's how I got into IT. So, I mean, it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, well, and college, especially major universities, does create a lot of opportunities that to be exposed to things that you otherwise might not be. I mean, I was only at University of Missouri for.
Whoops. Sorry about that. Whoops.
I was only at the University of Missouri for like 3 semesters,
Mhm.
right? But it wasn't in that 3 years. I joined the solar car team and
really?
helped build a completely electric vehicle powered only by the sun, right? And it works.
That's awesome.
It works like traditional EVs today do, right? A lot of what you see today, in fact, several of my teammates on that program, they went on to work on the EV1, which was the first electric vehicle created by GM.
Yeah.
So they worked on the EV1 project for GM. But we did things that are commonplace. We had regenerative braking, where when you're braking, it would charge the batteries back up. And we did wheel motors, not traditional drivetrains with shafts and transmissions. So what we were building were very simplified versions of a Tesla, right? And only ours were completely solar powered. So we were even building our own, we'd say carbon fiber, but they're actually Kevlar bodies. So we made our own bodies and build the molds and bake them and then apply all the solar cells and had motor controllers and wrote our own software. But one of the things that I was exposed to there was all this automotive stuff, and seeing automotive and technology combined was awesome. But something I'd never seen before is I started to see the machine shop and got exposed to all the mechanical sides of it. And I mean, we were making our own parts, on the lathe or milling things. And I just had no exposure to that. In fact, it had me rethinking, okay, was this technology side the way I wanted to go, or do I want to be a mechanical engineer? And just that I got it was fascinating to me, and the mechanical side of it, and exciting to realize, hey, you can innovate in this and develop your own stuff and make stuff better, and that exposure is really helped drive a lot of my personal passions later in life. So that was an experience that I look back on very, very fondly, because it was neat on so many levels. And that I don't know that I would have gotten that experience had I not started out at a university, right? I wouldn't have been exposed to that. So, again, circling back to the topic we've beaten to death, it's hard to say what's right there. But, there are some advantages beyond just landing the right job, because that was something that kind of helped me set up passions for the rest of my life that I still have today around automotive and mechanical and things like that.
And ironically enough, now the largest automotive company on the planet is a technical company.
Well,
Tesla.
that's true. Yeah. I don't know that they're the largest. They have the highest valuation.
Yes, that's another crazy thing about evaluations, like Rivian at one point was the highest valued, and they never even built a car at that point because a lot of it is speculation and R&D, and then you have to catch up with production. That's a very unique experience.
Rivian, I love their trucks.
They look amazing.
Yes.
I know a lot of my friends have put deposits on it, partially just on that fun fact where the truck will actually do like a 180 in one spot. Just that one fun novelty, like sold it to a lot of my friends when they saw like the YouTube ad for it.
Yeah.
It's like that. I mean, it really is going back to Elon Musk's philosophy of like, have fun and make a fun product. You're going to get people's attention.
Yeah.
I mean, and now the Teslas, those things are so fast with the Plaid. I mean, it's just astonishing. Although I still am old school, I prefer gas and a stick shift, which I'll be the last one to drive one probably. But
you know, I want to be a driving purist and say that, but I'm also a technologist.
Yeah.
And so, and I appreciate the fact that technology can make me better, right? And I don't want, and quite honestly, getting around day to day, I would love nothing more than if my car would drive me to work every day, because driving to work is not fun.
Well,
you know, there are a lot, you can have fun in a car, but getting from point A to point B isn't how you have fun in a car.
Well, especially if you're doing bumper to bumper traffic.
Oh yeah.
Although I would argue you can't text and drive when you're driving a stick shift bumper to bumper and you're only going 10 feet every 2 seconds or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to text and drive.
Well, no, that's why you can't though.
Yeah, well, no, but I want to text during that time, right?
Yeah.
I want to use that time. So how about the car drives for me
you.
so I can text or get my work done, right? I mean, it's
close.
Well, and you know, the work-life dynamic has changed and evolved so much the last couple of years through COVID and everything. And we're going through this at Higginbotham. We were a company that very traditional, and almost everybody was in the office. Then COVID shifted a lot of that, and now we're very much a hybrid working company with most people spending at least some time every week working from home or elsewhere. You know, I personally have taken advantage of that and traveled some while still working, and it's been great. But it's really made you think about, okay, where does work and personal life begin and end? Because I can work anywhere, and work can get a hold of me anywhere and everywhere now. So where's it all begin and end? And so that has me thinking about things like, well, when I do go to the office, man, what a waste of time that drive is. If my car could drive for me and I could use that, hey, that's more free time I have elsewhere. And I think finding those new ways to build balance or even continue to produce as much for our employers who pay us. Everybody likes to hate work, but I mean, we're all dependent on it. And you know, we appreciate our paycheck, and, you know, I just don't want to work for nothing. Right. So I want to do an appropriate amount of work for what I'm getting paid. And I think that's what I expect from my employees. And so if we can figure out ways to use our time better, and more effectively, well, the net profit is more free time and ways to enjoy our money that we earned, or go participate in that economy, or just go out and explore the world, right? And so, you know, I love the idea of self-driving cars, and that's somewhat ironic coming from me, because I've spent lots of time learning how to drive cars better. I'm one of my other responsibilities is I'm currently the Chief Driving Instructor for the Texas region of the National Autosport Association, also called NASA, but that confuses people with the space agency.
It still impresses my parents when I tell them I'm a member of NASA, though.
Yes, you are. And yeah, you've learned and you've invested in learning how to drive, but you know, that's a whole different kind. we're talking about performance driving,
Yeah.
right? And it's a whole different thing, and it really changes. You know, people say, "Oh, I love driving my car or the back roads and all that." Once you start experiencing a vehicle and what it's capable of in a closed circuit environment, a racetrack, you everything else starts to get boring. And so I don't want to give up. I don't want a car to drive me around a racetrack.
Yeah.
I want to drive there. I just don't want to drive to work every day because that's boring and pointless. If I, potentially I could use that time to free up more time
Or track
to
time.
drive myself, at the racetrack. Yeah.
That's the key. I mean, it's just, and every company is working, hours upon hours. Self-driving is right around the corner. You already have the pseudo-augmented self-driving where it'll do certain things, and then certain things they're not legally supposed to say are, but it could kind of do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know GM is rolling out theirs even further because they're doing their program where they're gathering all the analytics on the actual roads, putting that into their system, and it'll be interesting to see who is the first truly self-driving car company to come to market. Because everyone has their pseudo demo, kind of, but I mean, that's going to be, that and battery technology are going to be two of the most important and profitable technologies that come in the next 5-10 years, I think. It's going to just transform everything because you can accomplish, if you have a 40-minute trip to get to the office, all of a sudden that's 2 more hours a day where you can get more productivity, answering emails, just doing your job on the road.
Yeah, so I think that self-driving vehicles are important for the continued success of the United States in general. And that sounds weird, but part of that has to do with we're a country built around the automobile. Yeah. It's been, the automobile we were very successful in this country. We have some of the largest auto manufacturers there are, based here. And it came at an important point, or the automobile became important in a important time in this country's development, which really wasn't that long ago, right? Yeah. But and so we embraced that, right? And we built our infrastructure around the automobile. The challenge is that infrastructure hasn't kept up, right? Everybody complains about our roads, and we're not a country that embraces mass transit. And so we look at, well, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to make it work? And a lot of people will say, well, we need more mass transit, but it's really hard to establish that after the fact. Plus, you have complications with mass transit, not only cultural complications, but things like trains. You need right of way to do that, and it can take forever and be extremely costly because we didn't invest in building that out when land was cheap. Yeah. Plus, we're a huge country with lots of distance in between things, so it makes it difficult. So, one of the ways we can get better and more efficient at using the existing infrastructure is if we get better at navigating it and driving it smarter and with fewer incidents and slowdowns. And I do think autonomous driving will help in a lot of those ways and help us extend the life of our infrastructure without as much investment, which I think ultimately makes us a more successful country and keeps us being successful. So, that's, the alternative, I don't know. I mean, the alternative is we do what we were before COVID, and that is we just kept moving into denser and denser areas. Yeah. And, but even that still doesn't remove the need for a commute and things like that. In fact, in most cities, it was pretty common to have an hour commute. And so, I think that autonomous driving thing, giving time back to people, make that whole thing easier, solve our infrastructure issues, that all sounds pretty positive. So it's taken me a long time to come to this conclusion, because at first I'm like, no, nobody's taking my driving away from me. I want my
My car.
my manual transmission. Don't bother me with those anti-lock brake stuff. Just I want a car, and I want it to stop when I say it's going to stop and go when I say I want to go. But I don't know. My opinion's changed a little bit. Part of that's because I have a driving outlet. But part of that's because I think we need that to continue to be successful, to get, connect people that need labor with laborers and get them to where they need to go and those kinds of things.
And I mean, just like automotive accidents, just like IT, the biggest error is the human error.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the biggest flaw in the system we have at any company is all those pesky humans.
You ever hear the joke about the CISO talking to the CEO about security?
No.
He goes, "Hey, I got an idea. I can promise I can fix all of our security. Just have to get rid of all the users."
That would fix a lot of problems.
Right?
Yeah. Except, then nobody's around to sell this stuff.
That's true. So, the robots will help. The chat bots.
Yeah.
That technology's come so far. It's almost at the point where you can't tell if it's a person or not. It's astonishingly impressive.
It is.
It's scary.
It is. Yeah. I think there's, I still think there's value in people, but I do think that when it comes to a lot of interactions, those AI technologies can be very helpful in establishing some base things when you're routing a call, and sometimes with better accuracy than a human can, because those frontline call center people are a little apathetic about their jobs a lot of times. Yeah. And so the AI will potentially do a better job of determining what a person is contacting you for, what their sentiment is. Are they angry? Are they, excited? Are they frustrated? So you can have that kind of preparation and get that kind of data to the person that's receiving the call. And hopefully you're connecting that customer with the resource that can resolve the issue. So those kinds of things, the chat bots or even some of the voice prompted AI assistants and things like that, they do a great job. Where you can't really depend on them is to make decisions or draw conclusions, right? They're just trying to match data points. And, sometimes you get a feeling on how little they understand when you get one of the AI chat assistants that, why are you calling today? Or why are you contacting us? And you say, I need to schedule an oil change. And then, then they're like, well, have you seen these helpful articles? And they send you knowledge base articles about how to reset the tire pressure on your car or something, and I'm calling to schedule an oil change, right? So, sometimes they miss the mark, but they are getting a lot better, and they're good at for the most part, not in the example I made, but for the most part, drawing those data relationships, right? That's what AI is really good at, is defining relationships right now.
Oh, yeah. Then out of curiosity, how did you first get into racing?
I've always kind of been into cars. I liked them, but didn't have a lot of opportunity as a kid, right? My dad wasn't a car guy. We didn't have nice cars, but I had some friends that were into it, right? And I thought that was pretty cool. But then I went off to college, and for a little bit got exposure to the Sol Formula SAE. I wasn't on that team, but it's where they build little race cars, and I thought, that's really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. But then real world, I had to start working, right? And I got married and everything, but I got a little bit of success, and I had always wanted, a BMW, and that goes back to when I was not a little kid, but younger kid in the 80s. Had this book with like exotic cars.
Yep.
And I'm flipping through it, and there was this brick of a car in there. It was red, a convertible, and I'm like, why is this in here? And it was a BMW E30, which is the quintessential BMW, the 80s 3 Series. It was like the yuppie car, but it was also that was when the ultimate driving machine tagline was developed, and for BMW, and
that's insane. I just read one of the books about BMW.
Uh-huh.
That is the longest ever marketing campaign for automotive history to be used.
I'm
still
not surprised. Yeah. And I don't know if it's as relevant as it once was, but that's another story. But this car looked a little out of place. I mean, this boxy 3 Series sedan thing, well, this one was a convertible, but in with, I think there was whatever Ferrari of that vintage was, and a Lamborghini Countach, all that, those kind of cars, and then this. But I'm looking at the specs, and it's not that far off from these supercars and performance specs. And there was something about me that resonated. It's like a car. This is a performance car that looks like an everyday car.
Sleeper.
And I thought, that's really cool. And plus, I grew up in rural Missouri. We didn't have German cars in that part of the country. And so it still seemed exotic to me, right? But I could tell from price tags it was more achievable, right? So got older, started to find some success. We bought a used BMW, and that was great. It was 3 Series, not that E30. I actually bought, later in life, I bought that exact car that I saw in that book.
That's awesome.
Red with a black top with a beige interior.
You made the dream.
I bought that exact car, but that was cool. But decided to buy a BMW performance car. It was a 2002 BMW M Coupe. And this was a car, this is a weird car that a lot of people, unless you're a BMW enthusiast, probably don't know exists. So it's like the Z3, which is kind of like the Miata that BMW made, a little convertible. But this one wasn't a convertible. It was a 2-seater still, but it had a hatchback, like station wagon thing. And it was very, very odd. But it had a fixed roof, it had hatchback, but only 2 seats. And a big long front end. And in profile, it looks like an oversized clown shoe. And that's what they call these cars, is a clown shoe. And I bought this thing, and it was so cool. It was one of 300 they made for North America, which makes it really, 306 was it. Worldwide, it was just over 600 cars worldwide.
How do you find it?
I found it. Somebody had traded it in at a CarMax.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I got it, and somebody traded it in DC, had it transferred here to DFW, bought it. CarMax didn't know what they had, and I bought it. And it was only a couple years old at this time. And initially, these cars didn't sell well because what's unique about the BMW M Coupe, or the clown shoe, is it was a car that never really should have been built. It was something that some engineers in Germany, I mean, the story goes that they're like sitting around drinking beer, and they're like, oh, those Porsche guys, we've got to do something to beat them. And so they started designing a car that could go beat the 911. And they knew that they'd never get the budget to design one from the ground up. So they started they're like, what do we have? And they started with the Z3, and basically the design of the M Coupe used somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% parts from that BMW already had in their catalog. They had to make very little. And so they developed this, and they developed a prototype and somehow got the executives to sign off on this thing. But they never advertised it. They never had any marketing behind it. Really? And they wanted to position it below the BMW M3, so they kept the price point down on it and all these things. But when it was built, finally built, they took it to the Nürburgring, and it did outperform the 911 of the time. It set faster laps around the ring than a 911. So they accomplished what they wanted to out of, parts from the parts bin. That's awesome. Right? And built this car. And so they sold it, and it didn't sell well because they didn't market it to anybody, right? Most people, and it didn't quite look like a normal BMW. And so when I bought mine, it wasn't very collectible. Today, they're highly collectible. But I got this thing, and it was a monster of a car. And my problem was driving it around Dallas, I didn't enjoy it because it was just too much car for sitting in traffic every day. And that's when my wife found out about track days. I didn't know such things exist. I didn't know what a road course was or that racing existed on a road course. I just knew drag racing, right? So my wife signs me up for one of these track days, and I find out about it, and I just love the concept. And then I realized, hey, they race on these racetracks, and thought, wouldn't that be awesome? And so I went and did it. And before I ever did my first one, I decided this is something I want to do. I was born to do this. My actual experience was much different. I was terrible as a driver on the racetrack, and in fact was told that I should find a different hobby.
Really?
But I get stubborn, right? And I set my mind to something and I do it. And so I just kept doing it. I did lots of events, got lots of experience, and finally got connected with an instructor who was also a racer, and it just clicked for me. And then really took off. But it was, so the real reason I got involved with racing, it's all my wife's fault, which is fantastic because now it's hard for her to complain about what I spend on doing racing because she kind of started it.
It's your idea, not mine.
Yeah, and it is an expensive hobby. It's awesome. I mean, it's so much fun. It lets me dive into that mechanical stuff that I found when I was working on the solar car team that I really enjoy. Yeah. But anymore, there's so much technology involved in it as well. I mean, we put so much data in our race cars. Even at an amateur level, we're streaming telemetry about, the states of the engine, the tires. I mean, we're getting a spread of temperatures across the surface of the tire from all four tires in real time back in the pits. We're, monitoring pressures and temperatures and I mean, it's how much steering angle the driver's putting in and how they're using, how much pressure on the brake pedal and how much throttle and, and through all this, we can see not only how the vehicle's performing, but how the driver's performing. And we're doing all this analysis in real time. And then after the fact, doing data comparisons between our drivers, trying to determine where we can either improve the car or improve the driver. And, it's very data driven now, but which kind of brings it all together for me, which makes it a lot of fun. But I just wish it was a more affordable hobby. I mean, for me, it spawned a whole nother business just over, I guess it was over a decade ago. I opened Clown Shoe Motorsports.
Maybe after the car.
Named for the car that started it all. And it was a BMW performance shop, and really started that to help supplement bring in some supplemental income to support all this racing stuff. And that's been a great endeavor. I've made so many friends through that and business contacts. And, well, part of why I'm at Higginbotham today, because it was through Clown Shoe that I met Ross, who helped get me in the door at Higginbotham. And so, racing it continues to be a passion of mine. Love doing it. Don't get to do it quite as much as I'd like to now, but still very, very active. Also more active on the event and organization side than I used to be. I help manage and train drivers and put on events and those kinds of things as well. But yeah, just a fantastic sport. So much fun.
And you and Andy have done a great job with the program. Like, just from my experience, I've always had fun, driving. I've only ever owned stick shifts. I love them. And I remember the first time we were on track, you were telling me about the classes, and I was really worried because I'm like, the only experience I had in my life about racing was TV and Hollywood, which is like oil and water with facts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I thought, oh no, this is dangerous. And then hung out with you guys. It was the most fun I've ever had. And especially in HPDE 1 and 2, I love having the driver right next to me. So I was scared to death, but when you were in the passenger seat telling me exactly what to do at every given moment, I felt comfortable and exhilarating. It was so much fun.
You're dropping a bunch of acronyms.
That's true.
Right now,
It's too many.
I'm going to back up. So Topping mentioned Andy. Andy Pettit, who is one of my best friends. He's also been my business partner in Clown Shoe Motorsports, and now is my partner in crime with NasaTexas, helping me put on our driver development program. And we do, as part of NASA is a group of automotive enthusiasts. They have multiple programs that include racing, driver training, autocross, all sorts of different events. But Andy and I are involved with their high performance driving experience or education program, HPDE. And it's a program where if you've never been on track, and Topping's done this, his first time ever on track was with us at our program. He brought his hot hatch out, and we put an instructor in with him and taught him, or started to teach him how to get the most out of his car and get around the racetrack and really have more fun than anybody should be able to have in our cars. And so that's the program that he's speaking of, and what I'm doing with NASA now is about developing drivers. And you can start out with zero experience and progress, at whatever pace you want to progress. Different people. I was a slow learner. It took me a while to finally advance, and then I ramped up. We build the program, we advance you based on your capabilities, not on how many events you've done or how few you've done, many or few. And there are like 4 stages, and each one has increasing expectations, and your skills go with different levels. But it's a great program, and you can go from there and go in and go get your race license, apply, and there's a simple school NASA has to get your race license and start racing. Or many of our drivers just stay doing the, just for personal enjoyment, stay in the HPDE program and keep coming out and driving with us. And it's the kind of thing that just always stays challenging. I mean, I know guys that have been coming and doing, HPDE or racing for decades. I've been doing it 15 years now, and can't imagine a day when I wouldn't enjoy going to the racetrack.
Oh, it's so much fun, and it's a lot more controlled than people think. It's a lot easier to get into than people think, because, I mean, especially for I think you said, like, levels 1 and 2 is very common to people use their street car for the actual track. Like, you don't need to have a Ferrari or, something crazy to get into racing.
Right. You can have any. I've had I don't recommend you bring it out, but I have had a minivan on track before. Not the most capable vehicle, but it got me around and it was still fun. But yeah, you don't need anything fancy. You can start, start uh, in just about anything. I mean,
The Wayne's
Civic, an Accord,
the Wayne's World car.
Uh, yes, yes. There's actually one of those that runs around so frequently here in the area. So it's yeah, you don't need anything, but you meet a lot of good people too.
Right.
I mean, and a surprising amount of IT people. I mean, I know. Got introduced to the CISO of AWS through racing. He's a road racer. The owner of CrowdStrike is huge into racing. It's
He races
developed
himself. George.
yeah. George has a whole program, and he does a great job introducing people to it. CrowdStrike does a really cool program where they bring executives out to the racetrack on their race weekends and exposes them to the road course and CrowdStrike is a sponsor of the series as well as George drives, and they have their own sponsored cars, and they partner with AWS at a lot of those races, and yeah, it's neat, but there's a ton of overlap between technology and IT. I think the whatever in our brain makes us excited about IT must be the same stuff that gets us excited about cars, because I've met so many people in technology that are also into to cars and racing and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of overlap, but like I said, from a networking perspective, it's great because there's just so many people that that you get the opportunity to meet. And it's one of the fun thing about a hobby like this is people are really approachable, right? You can, where, you might not, if you're out on a Saturday night and you see, a guy walk into his Ferrari, you're not going to approach him.
Yeah.
Or, it'd be weird if you just come up to him at a parking lot, right? But at a racetrack, I mean, people welcome that, right? They want to talk about their car. They're there because they love it, and they love talking about it and sharing it with people. And so everyone's approachable. And so you can look at all these cars and talk to people about it. And, some of my best friends I have all been made through the racetrack. Another example of overlap, a guy that helped me build my very first race car back in St. Louis. My first car was a Porsche 944.
That's with it controversially. That's with the engine in front, right?
Yes,
and a V8,
and is water cooled, which all Porsches are water cooled now. But when back then, they did the 928 had the V8. The 944 was a 4-cylinder.
Really?
And at the time, it was the largest 4-cylinder ever produced from a displacement perspective, as a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder. And then the 944S, the 944 Turbo used that same 4-cylinder with a turbo. Now, that 4-cylinder, here's where you thought it was a V8. That's half of the 928's V8. So this was a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder.
Yeah.
The 928 had a 5-liter V8. And so it was literally two of these 4-cylinders together. Or actually, when they made the 4-cylinder, they split the V8 in half.
Really?
And so it had the same bore and stroke and used the same pistons as the V8. But it was basically half of the V8 they used in the 928. They put in the 944. Which was the poor man's Porsche of the 80s. It was actually a car that was initially designed for not Audi.
Volkswagen?
Maybe it was Volkswagen as a sports car.
They've had a couple
and then
partnerships.
And then Audi bought it, and they could never get traction in the 70s. And so Porsche was like, fine, we need a cheap sports car. The gas crisis was going on. This was in the late 70s, and it debuted as the 924 in the 70s. And then in the 80s, they did some updates, and that was actually with an Audi motor. The Porsche 924 in the 70s was a Porsche engineered body with an Audi motor, and it made no horsepower. Like
Yeah.
breaking 80 miles an hour was tough in this thing. So in the 80s, they redesigned it. They made it wider and more aggressive, and they put a Porsche design motor, which was the 4-cylinder, the half of the V8 from the 928. Today, the 944 is, it became later the Boxster, and the Cayman is kind of the successor, and now it's the 7. I forget my numbers.
7 Series?
No, it's 718, or I forget the model designation for what the Boxster and Cayman's become today. But that's kind of the lineage on that. But anyway, I started on that, and I was going.
So why did you start? Because there's a lot of cars out there. What made you choose that one
It
car
was
in particular?
popular. It was the most affordable way for me to race in a German car.
Really?
944. I paid like $2,000 for the car.
That's it.
And then built it in a race car. And there were a bunch of people racing them in the Midwest where I was. And so that's part of it, is I wanted to have people to race with and have fun. And it was a one model series. So everybody was racing the same 944. And so it was less about the car and more about how you were as a driver. But when I was building that, I put out a message on the BMW forum, because I was a BMW guy, even though this was a Porsche. And I was like, hey, anybody want to help me build a car? And this guy I didn't know responded on this forum and said, yeah, I'll help you out. I just got back. He had been in Peace Corps in Africa.
Oh, wow.
Just got back. And so we started working, and we spent hundreds of hours together working on this Porsche and became really good friends. Later, and we moved to Dallas, whatever. My wife and I were working on a business and had an opportunity to hire a director of IT. This guy that I met helping me build this Porsche in St. Louis, we called him and offered him this role because we needed someone fast and reliable that we knew well for this business we were building. And he relocated to here. His name's Rob Phelan. He works for EY now. He's global director of eDiscovery or something.
He takes the pictures, right?
Yeah, and
they
he's
look
also
great.
a motorsport photographer.
Yeah.
But, that was again how he got the opportunity. That was his first director level IT position. In fact, he and I had never worked professionally. We knew we were car guys, but I knew he was in IT, and I knew what kind of person he was. And so when we were personally building this business and needed someone we could trust, I thought of him and gave him the opportunity and helped his career. But again, this is where,
it all comes together.
Yeah, networking, cars, all of it. It all kind of comes together full circle. So I feel like we've covered a lot of grounds. I'm not sure we actually talked about anything.
I was going to say, my ADHD goes so far. There's so many good topics.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to have to have you coming on again sometime, though.
I'd love that. I always enjoy visiting with you, especially because you and I have so many common interests. It's always fun talking.
Oh, yeah. Cannot wait. When's the next track session, out of curiosity? Is that September? Or no, there's a Halloween one, I thought.
Yeah,
maybe?
I don't think with NasaTexas our next event is October.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I think it is Halloween weekend. That's here local in DFW. That
Eagle Canyon, hopefully?
I can't remember. It might be Crescent. I can't recall.
That was good too, though.
Yeah. But great event, and always welcome more students there. So
perfect. Thanks for coming on the show, bud. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, BJ.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to click like, subscribe, comment, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell anyone. Thanks for listening. Y'all stay safe. Have a great day. Topping Talks. 105 hours a week can't be beat.